Hey guys, I'm Kristen with ISeeStarsQuilting.com. Welcome to my channel. I shared a video a couple weeks ago on a sew-along that I put together for Taylor Swift fans, and I got a couple emails that said, hey, which quilt was yours? I want to see what you sewed. I left my quilt out of the video because I wasn't done with it yet. I had to finish the video, so I just kind of I hinted at it, but I really wanted to focus on the people who were in the sew-along and the ones that also worked so hard on it, because you guys see a ton of my stuff, all right? I wanted to show off some other people's stuff. I figured I probably should show you the quilt that I made, so that's what today's video is about. If you didn't get to watch that video with the sew-along and with the people who finished their quilt in the sew-along, here is the link to that video across the top of the screen here. Make sure you check it out. These finished quilts are absolutely gorgeous. So here is my quilt. I absolutely love this quilt. I'm going to do kind of a deep dive into this. I'm going to show you the reasons why I chose the fabric. You're going to know kind of a little bit more into the mind of Kristen and what decisions I made and why I made them. I had so much fun with this. I was able to experiment a lot with this, and this is the projects rather, that I absolutely love. You get to experiment with them. You get to play with them. You get to, like, there's not an exact pattern or science to follow, because I didn't do that in my sew-along. I said, pick something inspirational from Taylor Swift, from her music, from her concert, from, you know, whatever it is that it means the most to you. Take that on and then take it further and make it into a quilt. And that was so much fun, because I just got this explosive amount of creativity from these girls, and it was fantastic. And I was feeding off of it, and they are feeding off of each other, and it just turned into this whirlwind of gorgeous amazingness. So this is my finished quilt. It is very traditional in nature. You know, there's not any crazy angles or crazy blocks or anything. I guess you could kind of call it like a rail fence or like a jelly roll style, jelly roll-esque. It does use the jelly roll strips in it. I can't decide if I want to tell you like my inspiration first, or if I want to show you the whole quilt and then tell you my inspiration, okay? We're just gonna do this. If you're not a huge Swiftie and this means absolutely nothing to you, that's cool. I'm going to put across the screen what my inspiration was, and then it's your job if you want to close your eyes or not, okay? So I took my inspiration from this album right here, and it's my favorite album. I absolutely love the songs off of it. I love the feel of it. It puts me in my happy place. All right. So that was my inspiration. All right. So then I found these fabrics that I really, really loved, and I felt that they embodied that as well. And I knew I wanted to work with them. Here's the things that I got to experiment with on this. You can see that the quilting pattern that I did on it is what I like to call like a ripple. Okay, so it's like ripples in a pond after it's raining, you know, that's how the pond looks. You know, getting very artsy here in my explanations here. I feel like one person can make a huge difference in the world, and it's very similar to the ripples in a pond. Like, all it takes is one drop to create an entirely different texture on the surface of the water. Another thing that I want to show you is kind of the thing that started it all. Is the back of the quilt has this gorgeous panel on it, and I looked at this for a really long time. I couldn't decide if I wanted to cut up the pattern and make like windows and, you know, kind of add some sashing in between it, or if I wanted to take the pattern and make it where it wasn't recognizable anymore, but it still had the colors in it. So that's really what started it. And then I found other fabrics from that line that matched that panel, and I incorporated those into the front of the quilt. So originally the panel was going to be the front of the quilt, but I just couldn't cut it up, okay? I fell in love with it too much. I also bought it in the tan background. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but something's going to happen with that. So that's kind of how I got the other fabrics in here. Now, I did change up the pattern a little bit. So you can see there are some longer pieces, and then there are some shorter pieces that I then changed the way that they go. Okay, so I made some smaller blocks and put them together, and then I made some larger blocks and kept those the same size. So the 4 smaller blocks are the same size as the 1 larger block when it comes to the actual space on the quilt. But I really loved the way that it added some extra interest in there. You've probably noticed one very, I don't know if I want to say prominent or gentle detail, okay? But you've probably noticed one detail, and that is my favorite, is I experimented with adding lace to my quilt top. I really wanted to add some feminine qualities to it. You know, I'm very much an artist at heart. I have this side of me that, like, I love rules and I love boundaries and I love knowing how to do things. But I think my favorite part about rules is knowing that I'm allowed to step outside the lines. And you are too when it comes to quilting. You're allowed to step outside the lines. You're allowed to try things. And that's what I did with the lace. She has all of these gorgeous dresses, and I wanted to incorporate that so that it felt extremely feminine. It felt flowy. It felt really beautiful. I took myself to Hobby Lobby and I bought more lace because I wanted it to be subtle. I didn't want it to overwhelm the quilt, but I just wanted it to be subtle, and I didn't have any plan whatsoever. When I put this in, I was sewing the blocks together, and when I thought there should be a piece of lace there, I put it on. And in the lace, you can see that I sewed straight down the middle of the lace to attach it. And then you can see that I sewed very, 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 very closely on the edge of the lace, because after it goes through the wash, I don't want it to like roll up on the sides. So I think that I secured the lace pretty well. I realized that I didn't have a whole lot of lace to work with. So I got creative again, and I just did decorative stitching on it. And when I was doing the decorative stitching is when I noticed that the fabric had a tendency to bunch up a little bit. So if I was working with a very, very tight decorative stitch, which some of them are, I ended up putting a piece of batting underneath the fabric as I was sewing it. And I did that on the lace as well. So there is a little bit more for those threads to grab onto on the back side. And I did this all before I assembled the blocks. So when I tell you it's very, very random placement, that gave me a little bit of freedom in not having to have everything figured out beforehand. I don't know if you're like that, but I am. Sometimes I need to have all the information, all of the directions. I need to have everything figured out beforehand. But this project was one where I let myself play. And it was so, so nice. I did end up using a very, very fine golden colored thread with the quilting. And I think that just kind of added a little bit more warmth to it. Also, the quilt is, it's not a bright white. It's almost like a slight ivory to it, I guess you could say, or ecru, or, you know, there's a million different words that I could like pull out of my color theory brain, but we're just gonna say it's not a bright white, okay? So it still has that kind of vintagey feel to it. And I can tell you that this binding that I used that is kind of in those same tones and is in that golden with the stripes on it, I really loved this fabric and I wanted to incorporate it as well. So I thought I will use it for the binding. Well, guess what? This corner of the quilt has different binding. See this binding right here, the gold binding, and then it switches to this wonderful star fabric because Miss Swift is very much a star, and that's the story that I'm sticking with. And it's not the story that I didn't have enough of the yellow to go all the way around the quilt. So that's the story that we're sticking with and not the other one, okay? And on the back of the quilt, I surrounded the panel with a fabric that looks like it is a nice flannel, but it kind of has that nice gingham type print to it, but it's just cotton. So I surrounded the panel with that, and then I, put it all together. One last final detail on this quilt is that I couldn't let it go without some slow stitching. So as I was working on the back and I was trying to figure out how else I wanted to incorporate something that is a little bit imperfect, something that feels kind of vintagey, kind of old, kind of just connecting with the thread by hand again, because so much of this is, and don't get me wrong, I love machine stitching, but so much of this quilt is machine stitching, and I wanted to connect with the thread again in like a hand stitch way. So I actually took the logo for the album and I put it across the back of the quilt and I traced it, and then I used like a wash away stabilizer, and it's got a sticky side on one side, so I pinned that to the back of the quilt, and then I hand stitched around the letters so that you would be able to see the name of the album that the quilt is inspired by. And if you hadn't figured it out already, you just saw it as I showed you that. Hopefully if you're a Swiftie, you agree that I did my best to encapsulate the album and to capture all of those inspirations through her music, and at the same time make a beautiful quilt. So that's my quilt. It is probably one of my favorite quilts that I've made, simply because there were no rules. There were some rules, but not a whole lot of rules, okay? I just got to play. When I had an idea, I incorporated it. I played with it. I got to do the things that I got into quilting for in the first place, which is I got to play. So it was a really, really fun project. I hope that you enjoyed me showing you all of the bits and pieces of this quilt and the explanations of the reasons why I did them. I hope that maybe you got some inspiration from this, something that, you know, the quilts don't have to be hard. They don't have to be epic and magnificent and the best, greatest thing that you'll ever make in your life every single time you sew a quilt. Sometimes it is just for fun, and it is just something that makes you happy along the way. Next time that I do a sew along, I hope that you will join us. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I've got more tips, tricks, and tutorials to share with you on the next video. I'll see you soon. I'm Kristen with ISeeStarsQuilting.com. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. It helps me out. It helps YouTube know that I am posting stuff that you love to see. And also, you'll be reminded when I put up a new video. So I can't wait to see you then. Have a great week. Bye.